All right, everybody. Good morning. Welcome. Make sure, yeah, that audio is there. Dave's going to share this morning about the history of Reist, but also this book that you wrote and the journey that you were on with that. So I'm not going to take any more of your time except to say thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
Reist popcorn. We're going to celebrate 100 years next year. So founded in 1925. So we have a centennial celebration planned for September of next year, 2025.
No, you don't look that old.
I have a lot of really good care, I hope. So if you want to write a book, I suggest that first thing you do is talk to Don Crable, because Don set me off on the right foot. He said, Dave, you have to interpret for the reader. So you take all these, we had hundreds of documents and photos and diaries and contracts and all this stuff in drawers. And Don said, interpret for the reader. So I hope that in writing of my book that I was able to do that. So I'm going to talk about how the book came to be and the company, and we get into some Reist family stuff. And all these things are not, can't separate them. They all kind of flow together. So as I said, I grew up hearing a lot of family stories, and some were fact and some were kind of legend and myth, and you don't know quite what's true. And I didn't have the chronological understanding or the framework in my mind on which to place these stories, like, and also what was really significant, what is not significant. And so the process of creating this book helped me to understand all that. One of the things that really got me started, our youngest grandson, Shavi, was born in 2015. Shortly after he was born, Pam and I got an email from Jenny, our daughter. Mom, Dad, would you write down some stories that when my son is older, I can relate these stories? I want my son to understand his grandparents. I thought, that's great. So get started on that, and you just keep going. So one of the themes in the book, as you can imagine, is change. So many changes in the course of 100 years. Changes in manufacturing, changes in how much leisure we have. We have the automobile changed how we really changed society. The movies, Hershey Park, popcorn, so it kind of all fits together. There were tough times. October 1929, the stock market crashed. Reist Seed Company at the time was 4 years old, and I think that helped to propel or push my grandpa into popcorn. We'll get into that in a minute. So there were a lot of tough times. My grandma is quoted as saying, "We didn't have enough money to buy a broom." And in 1958, my grandpa said, "I want to sell out and drive a school bus." So, I mean, there's some really tough times. There were profitable times too. such as World War II. And not sure how I feel about that, being a Mennonite brethren, but I think it's true. So the most frequent question I get is, where does the title come from? And the title of the book is, and they left me off at $1,500. 100 Years of Progress of Reist Popcorn Company. So we'll get into that. So I think I have 36 pictures here. This is a map of Mount Joy. There are 4 different locations I'm going to talk about. Walnut Grove Farm, where I grew up, is here. The main operation now is here at Manheim Street. Square Street Railroad receiving is at the west end of town, and then the Snyder Mill is here. We'll talk about all 4 of those. It's about 1 mile between each of those 4 different locations. So this is my grandfather, Alvin. He was born in 1899. He's, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years old there. And it's at Walnut Grove Farm, where I grew up. The barn in the back is the corn barn, where he will, his first place of business in 1925, actually in the 20s. The corn barn is still standing. This picture was taken by my grandpa's sister, Anna. And I think to me, it represents the vast opportunities that an adolescent boy would have in terms of his development of common sense and overcoming obstacles, solving problems. I mean, there he is, three mules, Kate, Pete, and Toby, figuring out how to do it. So the first ad that I found in the Mount Joy Bullet in 1921, Grandpa selling russet potatoes. By 1924, he is in business as Alvin J. Reist, seed grower. And he has a very, the main thing that he's selling and producing, apparently, is Lancaster County shore crop corn. So what is Lancaster County shore crop corn? So I did some research. I discovered that it was developed by Isaac E.B. Hershey from Paradise, Pennsylvania, and his son, Isaac E.B. Jr. So I did a little reading in them, and it's a very useful, the genetics were used even beyond the open. Let's say the genetics were used well into the 40s, 50s, 60s. So anyway, Isaac E.B. Hershey. So then I'm reading a book about Her Foods, Nottingham, Pennsylvania. Her Foods has been a customer of Reist Popcorn for 35 years. This book was written by the founder, J.S. Her. Reading, and he's talking about his wife's father. So Jim Herr's father-in-law is Isaac E.B. Hershey Jr. I thought, that's interesting. So had a lot of nice conversations with J.M. Herr. So kind of interesting that our grandfathers were doing business 100 years ago. unexpected connection. So this is my grandmother, Mary Everly, grew up in Mascot, Lancaster County, born in 1896. So she is 20 years old there. I remember her as feisty, efficient, a good manager, and Pam remembers her as feisty also. She was a graduate of Lancaster General Hospital. She was an RN, class of 1919. There were 15 women that started out in the class, and 14 graduated. And Miss Helen Clark had died in October of 1918 of the influenza. So it just reminded me, my grandma must have treated influenza patients. And I've come to understand, or at least my theory, which I can't really prove, but I think that had it not been for my grandmother, Reist seed probably would not have been founded. And the story is, Grandma had a long-term patient, a Mrs. Brimmer from Lancaster. And apparently she developed a relationship. So my grandparents went to visit the Brimmers, and I'll read. I found an audio tape that Grandpa had prepared in 1976, and I'll read what he says. It may interest you how we got started in the Reist Seed Company, but I did not know this. One cold, snowy Sunday evening in January 1925, Mary and I drove the old Franklin car down to see some friends. So, by the way, remember the old Franklin car, because that's going to play into the story here in a bit. So Grandpa he's telling the Brimmers about what he's doing in the seed business. He's operating as Alvin J. Rice seed grower. So it must have been a great evening with the Brimmers, Sunday night, dinner, whatever, conversation. And Grandpa's describing his business. Next morning, Mr. Brimmer called. Brimmer was sort of interested in what I said about the seed business. And Brimmer had a friend, Weaver, who was also interested in what I had talked about. These three men met the next day at Weaver's office at 237 North Prince Street, Lancaster. So Brimmer, they each had their own tobacco business. So another thing I didn't know about my grandpa's business partners. So Weaver was on the east side of Prince, Brimmer on the west. You can still go to, there's still a 237 on the door at that location. So Grandpa goes on. We discussed the business, and they, Weaver and Brimmer, decided that it should be incorporated. They decided that I should be president of the company, and they were willing to put in $3,000 apiece, and they left me off at $1,500. Now I promised to put in $1,500, but I didn't know where the $1,500 was coming from. So I talked to my father, and he was pretty much opposed to the whole deal, but he finally agreed to endorse my note. So we had a lawyer draw up the incorporation papers, and I had a third interest in this. So, and the papers were in fact signed February 26, 1925. So in the course of 6 weeks, these guys didn't really know each other. So, and I don't know what that says about my grandmother's ability to create a sense of trust, and I don't know. Early letterhead. I found the printer blocks that created this, and Milt Friedley from E-Town College actually printed this. So the first place of business was at the Corn Barn, Walnut Grove Farm. 1927, they rented Snyder Mill. This is at the intersection of, this would be Longnecker Road. So Pam and I live back this road 1 mile. This is Main Street, Mountjoy, Little Tickies Creek. This house is still standing. So 1927, the annual rent, $250. The 1927 ad that my grandpa placed in the bulletin, here's what it said. Equipped with electricity and motors equal to 55 sturdy horses. So this was a huge advantage. Public utility electricity came to Mountjoy in 1912 and didn't come to rural Walnut Grove Farm until the mid-40s. Electricity, huge advantage. In 1928, they purchased, this is the main plant now in Mountjoy. Purchased, it was just, this building was in existence. The white part was not built at that time. And this was a tobacco warehouse, which was built in 1915, but Grandpa he only bought this lot and this lot. And that is a 1984 aerial photo. So, yeah, the brick building here, the 1915 building, was built by Gabriel Moyer, and he built that to receive farm equipment by rail. He also had a hardware business, and his hardware business was sold to a Mr. Joseph B. Hostetter. Anyway, so Rice Seed is now doing business at 2 locations, here and at the Snyder Mill. Seed wheat was a very, there was corn, seed corn, seed wheat. I found the printer blocks that actually produced this print, which I think is pretty cool. 1927.
Go back to that photo, Dave. Is that a premonition to the popcorn? Because in the background, those clouds look like popcorn.
I didn't think about that, but we're getting there.
Okay.
By the way, ask any questions as we go along. 1928. Here we see Lancaster County shore crop. I don't know if you can read it right here. This is at Walnut Grove Farm. The barn still stands. The corn barn is here. So then the third, so seed corn, seed wheat, and then mobile seed cleaning. So this picture was taken for promotional purposes. It's at Snyder Mill. You can see by the sign, popcorn is not on the sign. This is probably mid 30s, I would say. The mobile seat cleaners, they took a Ford Model A, pulled the body off of it, left the engine intact, pulled the body off, placed a seat cleaner there. That's what you see. And it was driven by the Model A engine. I have another picture that'll explain that a little bit too. So this picture is not very glamorous, but it is very significant. It was actually taken for promotional purposes. It is a seed corn dryer. It's dated November 1928. So this would have been the first use in the Manheim Street building. And they're using forced hot air, which is new technology in 1928. There would have been ductwork. The fan would have been down here, ductwork, forcing hot air up through. They heated the air by burning corn cobs. Pretty practical, right? So the reason this is significant, so back to my grandpa's tape, audio tape. This is my grandpa. In 1930, remember, this is right after stock market crash, October 29. In 1930, we wanted to do something to keep our dryer busy. So we got into the popcorn business, because you can dry popcorn here too. We only had a few tons the first year, and in fact, we had that few tons a few years. It didn't sell very well, but we didn't get discouraged. We kept pulling away. So popcorn, 1930 was the first popcorn. Probably they got into it to have something to contribute to the overhead. And it was a very low investment to get into it. And probably low expectations would be my guess. Back to seed corn. How do you market seed corn? You find a small boy, my uncle, 3 years old here, give him 2 huge ears. And so you either need a small boy or a large horse. This is Pennsylvania Farm Show at Harrisburg, 1931. And the sign says, the world's largest horse, guess his weight. Well, if you're going to guess his weight, you have to write down your name and your address. And that's how they... The horse, according to the Mountjoy Bulletin, the horse weighed 2,830 pounds. That's a thing. So they only used it 1 year. So the horse's name is Diamond. And this is all open pollinated seed. I don't know how much I want to get into that, but we'll get into that a little bit. Now, back to Snyder Mill. I include this picture because here you can see the Model A, Ford Model A. The machines have turned 180 degrees. So Snyder Mill, September 1939. There was a significant visit from the Department of Labor and Industry. the inspector was not particularly impressed with what he saw on the inside of the building. So he writes a letter, and his bullet point number 5, do not store grain or put additional weight in the building until foundation of building has been repaired. And then in caps, at once. So there's a little bit of a problem because the annual rent was $250. Or it may have been $275. The building, I probably was a bit obsolete because I think the electricity, you know, they no longer needed the water power to run the building, and it was probably in poor repair. And my grandpa being not the owner, what's his incentive to spend a lot of money? Anyway, apparently they did not fix the building according to what the inspector stipulated. July 1944, huge wheat crop. They closed the doors at 5:30, according to the Mountjoy Bulletin, and 6 o'clock she came crashing down. And so the building was actually owned at the time by Clarence Schock of Placo SICO fame in Mountjoy. And he and Reist Seed settled for $5,250. And the mill was subsequently demolished. So then immediately, 1944, they built this part. And all the operations were moved to the Manhunt Street location.
That was right in the middle of the war. I mean, was that a problem building that building, or able to get it done?
They
Shocking.
started in the fall. Like, building collapsed in July, and by fall
It's amazing.
they were yeah. And the girders in this building are huge. I think they overcompensated for, like, we're not going to let this collapse. So
Dave, were they able to salvage much of the wheat?
I think some, yeah, they talked about moving it to the HS Newcomer warehouse into this, yeah. Yeah. So this is a corn detasseler. This is my dad. Grandpa's in the driver's seat. And sort of the short story, I talked about open pollinated corn in the 1931, but by 1950, we're creating hybrids. Basically what they would do, here's the sex talk with corn. You would, the pollen, which is the male part of the reproduction, comes from the tassel. The pollen from the tassel drops onto the silk. Each silk picks up a pollen, and that silk goes to a kernel. So you have the pollen, the silk. So what we're doing here with hybrid, they would plant 3 rows of the female, 1 row of the male. And so they want the pollen from the male to pollinate the 3 rows. So, which means you have to remove the tassels from the 3 rows of female. So that's what we're doing. Hybridization of corn, I think, was first developed in the 19 teens, and it took a couple decades till it was accepted. So where do you get all these kids to, you post bulletins around town?
This is before OSHA.
Yeah,
Just asking for a friend.
yeah.
Age 13 and older. I like that.
Yeah, isn't that something? So I include this picture. This is 1982. It's my dad and Fred Erb. And it's significant because it represents a shift. It represents our shift into now we are spending capital for the popcorn business. So this is at Manheim Street in the plant, building steel bins to modernize that whole part of the business. And the bins are still in use.
Dave, what was your involvement at that time? 1982.
1982, I had been at the company 7 years, and I was chafing at the bit to, come on, we gotta upgrade a little bit, and we gotta spend some money, and so
You pushed for this?
yeah, I take credit for this. I was very I think my dad was reluctant to invest money and commit to the future. And
Typical young upstart.
yeah, I was a young upstart, and I was pushing and chafing, and he finally relented.
You gotta realize your dad lived through the Depression and they didn't want to spend any money because it could happen again tomorrow.
Yeah,
My dad was the same way.
he was extremely frugal, and
Yep.
yeah, I grew up with the frugality
For good
and
reason.
actually, I think the way we did this first set of bins, these hoppers were custom made, but my dad bought some old bins down in Maryland and kind of redid all the sidewalls. I mean, he didn't like to go with brand new stuff. And it's okay.
Sure. Dave, what was the origin of popcorn? Where did it come from? The concept of popcorn.
It goes back to the Native Americans,
Indians.
5,000 years ago, South America.
But how did it get to this country and how did you guys switch to popcorn? That's what I was wondering. As a product.
Okay, well, I think in 1930, like, what's the stock market crash going to do? What's happening? How can we contribute to the overhead? And then you had, at the same time, we have Hershey Park, the movies, more leisure time. Let's try popcorn. I think that's how it was. That your question?
Okay, so you're switching to like retail from farm work. You're supplying the farmers and now you're gonna supply a new product that is becoming on the market.
Popcorn was probably 1% of the business. In fact, it was less than 10% for, I'm going to say, until 1960. So it was just sort of a add-on for 3 decades.
And they would have been able to use basic same equipment, maybe some new screens or sieves or whatever,
Exactly.
and they were ready to do a new product.
And they had the same know-how in terms of soil type, farming practices, when to pick it, they had all that knowledge. So I think it was a fairly easy transition to go from seed corn, let's grow some popcorn too. this is Walnut Grove Farm. And I include this to show the corn cribs, which are corn cribs. This picture was taken in 1984. 40 years ago. I can't believe I'm talking about stuff that happened 40 years ago, but you're right. So we don't handle popcorn on the ear anymore. It's all field shelled.
When did you last have earphone?
Probably in the mid 90s.
So those, I mean, from here, they look like grain bins. They are actually.
Well, these are, what you're seeing is grain bins, but kind of behind, maybe you can't see it, are corn cribs. Back here,
Gotcha. Oh,
so Pam and I grew up in the farmhouse. Grandma and Grandpa were here, and this is where Pam and I live now. So the Reist hot pop label was first used in 1940. And this is Jay. Jay still works for the company. You can just comparing the two labels. We still use the high pop label. Interesting, 1940, Rice Seed Company, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And we're growing South American yellow, which is an open pollinated yellow popcorn. 1990, we're investing some money. It's a new air screen separator. 1996, we purchased our first color sorter. This machine could look at 12,000 pounds an hour, looking at individual kernels, and just amazingly accurate. So, and this machine was replaced about 4 years ago by a larger, actually there are two separate lines now, and I think they run, I don't know, 30,000 pounds an hour. So, and amazingly accurate machinery.
separating out what?
There'll be a mud ball. We call it a mud ball or dirt ball, which part of the harvesting process, it's like a little ball of dirt that is about the same weight and size as kernel of corn. It's just tough to separate, but the color separator sees a different color. The machines now can, any kind of discoloration, or any kind of an off type, like maybe a soybean or a dent corn, or you can tell it to, they can even pull out clear glass. One of the problems, an intersection in the rural area, not so much in Rapid Township, but in north central Ohio, where we grow popcorn, stop sign. So a weekend night, high school partiers, and they throw their beer bottles in the popcorn field. Well, now you come along and get some glass in your pop. So anyway, these machines can separate clear glass. Pretty amazing.
Aren't you gonna say who that is?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, this is Mike Higgins, 2000. He worked there in the summertime, and then married our daughter Erin in 2001. And he is now the owner and president and owner of Reist Popcorn Company.
24 years ago.
Yep.
Amazing.
My parents, 1996. When I was growing up, and I would, as a teenager in Mount Joy, you know, it's like, well, who are you? And, well, my dad is Henry Reist. Oh, okay, yeah, we know. Seemed like everybody knew Henry, and it's like, okay, there's your passport. You can move about the town. My mother was a part-time bookkeeper at the company in the 60s, and then that's our 2/3 scale stagecoach, which we use for promotional purposes. The creation of the mural in 2001. We had a name change from Reist Seed to Reist Popcorn. And at that time, Wayne Fetro painted the mural. Took him, I think, 5 days from beginning to end to actually do the painting.
Wow.
So that's my dad, Wayne, myself, and my nephew, Jesse, who posed on the mural. And Jesse is 7 years old in this picture. So here we are unloading popcorn at the Norfolk Southern rail station in Lancaster. And the way it worked, the railroad would push the loaded car of popcorn up on the trestle, and we would back our trailers underneath, and just purely a gravity, open the gate on the car and load 50,000 pounds onto the truck, about 4 truckloads per car. Then we would haul it from Lancaster to Mount Joy. And that worked okay for a few years, but Norfolk Southern decided to close this operation. I think there are some liability issues, as you might imagine. And so we had to figure out another way to receive railroad cars. So this is the Florin freight station. We ended up buying that lot. So this would be at the west end of Mount Joy. And it now looks something like this.
Dave, was it that advantageous to do rail versus trucking?
Yeah, with a product like popcorn, which is not a just-in-time type of thing. So rail is less expensive, but it's also
But it gets there when it wants to, right?
kind of, yeah. So, but for our purposes, it works. It works. I think now Mike has, I think he has 20 leased railroad cars that do nothing but haul popcorn from different points of origin in the Corn Belt states. So,
Okay. I have a question that sort of deviates from your line of thinking, and if you don't want to answer the question, that's okay.
sure.
But working with you on the book, I discovered there's a whole history of flying airplanes in the family, and this great story about your grandfather or father coming home at night. Could you just say that quickly, or?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fascinating story.
Well, this is one of these, myth legends that's turned into fact by doing some so the story is, 1946. My dad is 18 years old. He has a pilot's license. October of 46, Sunday afternoon, my dad is out flying the plane. And the plan was, Grandpa was going to fly his elder son, Donald, from Mount Joy back to Penn State. He's a student at Penn State. So the problem is, Henry, my dad, he doesn't get the plane back to Walnut Grove Airport when he was supposed to, which means that Donald and my grandpa, they depart, I don't know, it was 3:30 in the afternoon or mid to late afternoon. They depart Mount Joy, bound for State College
Wait,
in the plane.
I thought the plane wasn't back in time.
Well, I guess he was supposed to get back at 2 p.m. and
Got back.
thanks for clarifying that. So it's 3:30 or 4. And Grandpa and Uncle Don take off. And when does it get dark in October? At 7:30, getting dark. Plane's not back. Grandma tells my dad, get a car and park it at each end of the runway. and then Grandpa landed in the dark. So this is the myth, or this is a story that I grew up with. So I'm going through my grandma's stuff, and here I find she has it all written out. Henry was this, and
So that was the real story.
yeah, it was a real, and I have her actual, the day of.
Amazing.
So I do have another airplane story.
Go ahead, tell it.
Well, we're getting there.
We don't want to run out of time.
So this is our Christmas dinner 2018. I can't believe it's 6 years. So here I am passing the baton to our son-in-law, Mike. This is a representative baton, and my thought about the baton was, I'm gonna get a tube from a roll of hand towels, put some foil, wrap some foil, and Pam says, "That's pretty cheesy, dude." That's pretty cheesy. So what I did, my brother Tim has a machine shop, and he created a baton, and on the baton it says Michael A. Higgins, Reist Popcorn Company, the date, and it has wisdom, courage, and strength. So that I hope that when he gets into those tough times, he can think about that. And I know I have dwelt on those words often. My retirement celebration in 2021, this is at the farm. Our daughters and sons-in-law, Pat is not in the picture. He had already left to put his kids to bed. So, this is a picture of me and my grandpa in 1967. So he would have been, let's see, 68 years old, and I was 14. Now, a little bit about my grandpa's, I don't know, I think this this kind of represents my grandpa's personality. It also represents maybe the times. I say circa 1950, but I found out it's actually 1946. Elm Tree School. The building is now a residence, and it would be just east of Mount Joy on Elm Tree Road. You can almost see the building from 283. It's just when you're eastbound, it's just before the Manheim Mount Joy exit. So I come across this picture in the archives, and I'm like, what is the story here? What is the story? With that was also this picture. So here, this is Grandpa, Santa Claus, his airplane, which I recognize in the school. So here we are, the building, the airplane, all these kids, 2 Santa Clauses. What is going on here? What? I wish I had somebody who could tell me the story of what's happened. So I got on the Mount Joy grapevine, whatever, and wouldn't you know, I found somebody. The boy in front of this teacher is Harold Brubaker, farmer from Mount Joy. And here he is. So this is Harold. He was born in 1933. He tells me the whole story about what's happening. This is actually 2 schools. The Elm Tree School was giving a Christmas program for the kids. I'll call it the Arisman's Church School. I'd come over. It's a couple miles away, and he's telling he was so excited to tell me and Pam the story of how this all happened, and so he hangs this picture on his wall he lives in the Fairmount retirement home in Africa. And I thought, it's just a great connect. Teacher is Mrs. Nunemacher, and the Santa Claus was Walter Dukes, who worked at JB Hostel. He had the whole story. Now back to the audio tape. My grandpa says, Mary and I drove the old Franklin to Lancaster. So I'm back to 1925. I'm thinking old Franklin. Then I come across a picture, which turned out to be a Franklin. So I'm thinking, we got to buy a Franklin for our centennial celebration. So we found a Franklin and purchased it. So it's really solid car. We've had some engine problems which are being resolved, and so
I guess it's out of warranty.
so this is a 1920. It's the same model as the one in the picture, which I didn't show you, of my grandparents. So I'm on the board of Mount Joy Area Historical Society, and one of our things that we're trying to do is raise the awareness of the Historical Society. So thinking maybe we can use the car in the Memorial Day parade in Mount Joy, which we did. So here we are. We had a lot of fun with this. Warren Greenewald is my passenger in the front seat. He's 99 years old in this picture. He'll be 100 in June 4th. So this coming year, he'll be 100 years old. Sharp guy. So the sign says, who's older, Warren or this car? Go to the Mountjoy Area Historic website to get the answer. We had a lot of fun with that. So that's my story.
Dave, the most unusual thing about that car, and I have a picture of you in the parade, just like this, for Memorial Day, is that you didn't mention this, but that car is air-cooled engine.
Yes.
I was shocked to find out when you showed me the engine. Air-cooled 1920. What's the chances? I never knew there were air-cooled cars back then. But there you go.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about it, and it's kind of a fun.
No radiator.
So
Getting back to the connections that you have with your book, I was taking a tour of the Crider Dairy Farm in Mannheim, just right after Thanksgiving. And our tour guide was a retired farmer, and he was telling us all the history of the Criders, but then he was also talking a little about himself. He's a retired farmer from the area and where he grew up, where his family farm is. And I thought, that sounds awfully close to the Elm Tree School and Harrison's Church. And I just happened to say, did you go to school at one of these? He said, yeah. I said, do you remember when you were a little boy, did Santa Claus come in an airplane? One time he said, well, yes. How did you know that?
That's funny. Wow.
I said, well, little bird told me.
That's a little bird, yeah. That is funny.
I think I had this story right. This is a little bit of a myth, and I wish Lily Ann were here, but I think my grandpa also flew Lily Ann's dad to the new Elm Tree School, which is where tractor or was it Tractor Supply is. I think I have a newspaper article about that. So yeah.
Great.
Any other questions?
This is so elementary, but forgive me, what is the difference between popcorn corn and corn that you would buy at a Amish stand?
In other words, difference between popcorn and field corn and yeah, it's different genetics. It's a different pericarp, which is the shell of the corn. Different protein content and starch content, and yeah, you have to plant popcorn seed in order to harvest popcorn. You can't take dent corn and change it into popcorn.
So if you would take field corn and put it in a pan with oil and heat it up, would
It would puff.
puff and not burn? It would puff?
Well, it would puff and then burn. But yeah. Yeah, it's the physical makeup of the kernel.
Hey, when you get in the popcorn business, I mean, I think this is incredible. Were you the only one, or did you have competition?
Lots of
Late
competition.
20s.
But yeah, I'm sure there was. I mean, the whole, yeah, there were a lot of mom and pop. Actually, back in 1900, you would have grown popcorn in your garden. And then as society shifted.
So it was a home thing.
Yeah, it shifted from a home thing to companies.
Interesting.
And I actually have a diary entry. Our neighbor's farm, the Nisleys, have a diary entry of where they mentioned going out to the field and picking, or going to their garden to pick popcorn. 1897. So,
We grew some popcorn on our farm, just for our own consumption.
Yeah. grows a lot like corn.
Yeah.
If we buy her popcorn in bags that comes from
Yes,
Reist?
yes, yeah. Yeah, they've been our customer for 30, probably close to 40 years. So, yeah.
So Dave, how's the popcorn industry after the pandemic? Coming back?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. I know Mike is involved a lot more in exporting than I ever was. We're exporting corn to Japan and South Korea and Thailand and Mexico.
Okay.
But yeah, the industry took a shift away from movie theaters, and there was more home topping, and so.
Okay.
I have a really odd question. Is there any way to eat popcorn? Is there a cookbook for popcorn? So the reason I ask this is I recently saw a reel where someone put popcorn in a blender and put milk in it and then he drank it. I don't know if that'd be good or not. But I didn't know if there's any.
There are some books.
Yeah.
There are some books of recipes and
Yeah. Like I know the popcorn balls, caramel corn and all that.
we had a popcorn recipe contest in Mount Joy a few years ago. And somebody took raw popcorn and made a stew. Oh, that was pretty unique. Yeah,
Popped or unpopped?
unpopped.
And it got stopped, and chewed?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Are you shutting me down?
I am.
Okay, all right.
On that note.